My cat's just meowing right now. What? How am I supposed to shoot a video with a cat just meowing at me? Do you want to say hi to YouTube? There's my Kiki. Do you want to talk about the Masters G22 together? What do you think about it? Do you like the Masters G22? I think she loves the Masters G22, just for the record. She's got good taste, so. Is the Masters G22 still worth it in 2021? Quite simply, the Masters G22 is one of the most important parts of my entire workflow. And that comes down to a few different reasons, but it's become such a workhorse in my setup, and it carries the weight of so many things that I don't want to really put through my other airbrushes. Things like enamels, oils, primers, washes, inks, varnishes. All this stuff I do not like to put through my nicer airbrushes because I know the risks associated with it. It can be harder to clean, it can break down some of the parts and seals faster. These are things I don't want in my nicer airbrushes, which in turn extends the longevity of these nicer airbrushes, and the quality of them stays very high over many months and many armies of use. So effectively, the Masters G22 is one of those things that improves the overall quality of my workflow by carrying the weight of all of the things that I don't want to put through my other airbrushes. That is the core of what I love the most about the Masters G22, and a lot of that comes down to some of the pros that we'll get into right now. I think we need to get into the first thing that is the most important thing in my opinion about the Masters G22, and that's the durability, especially given the price point. In my first Masters G22 review, I said that if this airbrush makes it through the winter and even into the spring, that I would be raving about this airbrush, and it made it that year all the way up until May. And at that point in time, it didn't break down or stop working. I just replaced it with a newer one to continue to have a high quality airbrush functioning well. And ultimately I took that airbrush and I turned it into my enamels and oils airbrush. It didn't stop working, it kept going. And since then I've ordered 5 Masters G22s. 2 of them are still new in box and have never been used. And my first airbrush has fully broken down and is now not in use. But given the price point, the durability on these things is insane. They keep going, they keep shooting whatever you put in them, and I am extremely impressed with the build quality and even the trigger control on such a cheap airbrush. The workhorse mentality, I think, is the strongest selling point for the Masters G22. It doesn't do fine detail work. It doesn't do, really perfectly smooth blends, because sometimes there can be issues between the fitment of the needle and the needle cap, and it might speckle a little bit, it might get a little bit of dry tip, but what it brings to the table is a kind of a jack of all trades approach to painting, and this product handles everything. It's not perfect at every single thing, but it can handle so much stuff. And that to me is what's made it the workhorse of my flow. Because it continues to shoot fine, this is an airbrush that I feel very strongly recommending for people's very first airbrush, as well as for people looking to get into expanding their airbrush collection. I think the very first time you order a nice airbrush, something like an Iwata HPCS or even an Infinity or who knows what else you think is good, you should just get one of these airbrushes with it and use this to take the weight and the bad product workload off of your nice airbrush. Use this seriously to shoot your primers and anything else that might gunk up, cause some long-term issues inside of your nice airbrush. These can handle that. And by putting that stuff in there, all you're doing is adding more longevity to your investment. In a lot of ways, I look at this as kind of airbrush insurance. This is protecting my nicer investments from being subjected to all of the things that can long-term break down airbrushes. Now, with the proper cleaning regimen, you won't have to worry too much about that stuff, but I'm one of those people that doesn't take as good of care as my airbrushes as I should, because I don't have the time. I don't really see the value in spending time breaking down and cleaning every single detail of my airbrush each time I use it. And instead, I often just run a cup of cleaner through it at the end of the session, and that's plenty, and has been plenty for me over many hundreds of models. And a lot of that comes from being able to put my trust and rely on a Masters G22 to carry the workload for me, knowing that I can be a little bit more abusive to this airbrush, because at the end of the day, if it breaks down, I'm only out a small percentage of the investment of my large airbrush. One of the other pros to this is if you're located in the United States, seems to be pretty easy to get a hold of. It's almost always available on Amazon Prime, which means at any point in time, you're about 2 days away from owning one of these. Or if you have one already and it breaks down, you're about 2 days away from replacing it. This to me is a significant pro, especially for anybody who does any sort of professional painting work and relies on an airbrush. This will help you maintain a workflow even when the worst can happen. That 2-day pause might feel like a lot, but in reality, when we think about sourcing parts for some other airbrushes, specifically things from like Iwata from Japan, it can be weeks on a lead-in time. Or you could plan ahead and invest in a couple extra like I do. I have 2 on hand at all times. They're just sitting literally right here. Check it out. Well, they don't sit right here. They actually sit over there, but I have 2. These are 2 brand new in box, never been used. I keep these ready to go to prepare for the worst. And I think that should tell you a lot about my mentality and my workflow, because if something went wrong with my airbrushes, I don't keep a backup Iwata HPCS. I don't keep a backup Infinity CR+. I keep 2 backup Masters G22s. What do you think is the most important part of my workflow? I mean, that's it. Like, the Masters G22 is it. If something breaks down with my airbrush setup, my rigs, my brushes have issues, you know, the needle cap has some problems, the needle gets bent, whatever, I have Masters G22s to carry me through that gap. That's how important this airbrush is to my workflow. And I think that we should get to, you know, the final pro of this airbrush, which is the price point. The price point on the Masters G22 as of today on Amazon is $30. With that in mind, the Masters G22 is, in my opinion, still the cheapest and highest quality airbrush that you can hunt down. Which does lead us though into the first con, the price. The price, let's be honest, has gone up 50% since I started this review. The price is up from $19 shipped to $29.99 before taxes. Although the price has gone up, I still think that it's extremely comparable to its closest competitors, things like the Iwata Neo that typically you'll find for about 60 bucks. It's still half the price. You're gonna have the same issues that the Iwata Neo has. You know, sometimes replacement of parts and availability can be a little bit hard. You're gonna have the same issue that if you over tighten the needle cap right inside of it, right inside of the tip of the airbrush, if you over tighten that needle cap, shredded, gone, popped off. It's a nightmare. It's how I ruined my very first airbrush, which was the Iwata Neo. And that issue can still happen on here. But the difference is if you do that, you're only out $30 versus $60. Given the price point of, in my opinion, its closest competitor, the Iwata Neo, I will take 2 Masters G22s for the same price as a Neo all day, every day. I genuinely believe in Iwata's products. I really, really enjoy it. I think my actual favorite airbrush I do own is my Iwata Eclipse HPCS. It is an amazing airbrush. I don't think the Iwata Neo is worth it at all, considering the things that you can get for significantly cheaper. Even with the 50% price increase from $20 to $30, this airbrush can still hang with the Iwata Neo. And for that reason, I have no issue recommending this. But for now, I think it's fair to say that one of the cons of the G22 is the recent price increase. And I don't know if that's due to production issues, manufacturing issues. Given the state of the world over the last 2 years, things have changed significantly. And if the increase in price is due to that, that's way out of our control. And maybe the price will come down in the future. But as of right now, the G22 sitting at $30 is a con, in my opinion. It's gone up, but for the price point, I don't know. You're gonna have to decide if that increase of $10 makes this airbrush still worth it. To me, it is. I will still buy it. I mean, I have new ones that have never been used. So there's 2 things that I've also heard from, you know, people who used to watch my streams and friends in the hobby space now. So there's 2 things I've heard about the G22 that I've personally not experienced. Number 1 is its availability overseas. I've heard that you can't really find this airbrush outside of the United States. I don't know. I don't really know how to confirm that. I mean, I suppose if I was a bit of a tech wizard, I could set up like a VPN and log into Amazon from a different country. I don't know. So if you're watching this and you live in not the United States, go on Amazon and see if it's on there, the Masters G22. And if it's not, will you let me know in the comments, just so I'm aware. But that seems to be the consensus, is that this is not available outside of the United States, but I cannot confirm or deny that. The other thing that I have heard is consistency of quality issue. I've only heard this from one person. I heard that one person got theirs shipped and delivered and it was just a disaster out of the box. It would barely work. It was sputtering. There was issues with the build, it sounded like potentially the needle cap wasn't quite fitting inside of the body right. I've only heard that one time. From my use, which is extensive, through 3 of them with 2 in my pocket, I've had none of that issue. But given the price point, it's something to be aware of. There could literally be a build issue, but depending on where you source it, which is most likely Amazon, just return it and get another one. Just say it's not working, send it back, get another one. You should be fine. But I have heard that from one person, so just floating that out there as a potential issue so that nobody can come back and say, hey, you didn't tell me that there's build issues, the sauce, you idiot. There might be. I've not experienced it, but I heard it from one person. I don't know. I'm just trying to tell you guys what I know. And really, the last thing to know that I will say as a con is that this airbrush is not for detail work. It's really not. And I would say for the most part, it gets color grading done and initial color gradients done. But don't expect this to be the end all be all airbrush that you own. It will not deliver excellent detail work on your miniatures. It does what it does, which is basing work, filter work, and really initial color grading, but it does not do some of the fine detail work. If you're somebody who wants or thinks that your airbrush will do amazing OSL on the eyeball of your Space Marine, this is not the airbrush for that. It's not even close. What you will get out of this airbrush is something that will consistently deliver what you need it to do. It will consistently shoot the paints that you put through. It will rarely, if ever, break down or have problems. This airbrush is an airbrush that will simplify your workflow. You will rely on it to carry the weight of everything that you do not want to put in your nicer airbrushes. And ultimately, what this airbrush will do is buy you peace of mind. So the answer to the question, would I recommend the Masters G22 still in 2021? A resounding yes. This airbrush has been a tremendous, tremendous help to my workflow, my business, and I cannot recommend this airbrush enough. Even considering the recent $10 price hike, this is still something that I would invest in all day. And if you're looking at this wondering, should I order this? Is this a good beginner brush? Should I just get this brush to just handle things that I don't want to put in my nice airbrush? Yes, yes, and yes. Masters G22 remains undefeated at this price point, and I cannot recommend this product enough. So if it's time to step up your airbrush setup, weirdly enough, look no further than the new $30 Hala, which doesn't sound as good as the $20 Hala. $30 Hala? It's just not the same. It's not as cool. For a nice crispy 20, you know, you get an airbrush, now it's a 20, I don't know. I still recommend the hell out of this airbrush, and I think that you're gonna love it. Check it out, add it to your collection, get to painting.